Today's lesson is the birthmark. Hello, everybody. My name is Roger.
And my name is Helen.
And today we're going to continue talking about our featured American short story, The Birthmark, written by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And this story came out a long time ago in 1843, but as we mentioned last time, it's still valid today because it's all about looking perfect.
Right. And, well, the good thing about modern times is the definition of perfect is a lot wider. It includes a lot more different things. So back then, it may have meant having perfect skin. But today, somebody who has freckles may be considered beautiful, may be considered perfect. And people with darker skin are considered beautiful. So the definition of perfect, of beauty, has changed, has become more inclusive. And that is a good thing.
Exactly. And of course, nowadays, what's it called? Corrective surgery. We used to call it plastic surgery, but we've got a new term for it now. Basically, you change some features in your appearance, like you get a nose job or you get a facelift or something like that. It's a very similar concept. So again, the story is about Aylmer and his wife. He adores her and she's a dedicated wife, but eventually he begins to dislike her birthmark, and that's the birthmark on her cheek in the shape of a hand. He wants her to get rid of it. So let's get to it. Let's begin today's lesson by listening to the first part and find out what happens next.
Eager to begin working, Aylmer brought Georgiana to the laboratory where he had previously conducted experiments. As they entered, Aylmer caught a glimpse of the birthmark and shuddered, causing Georgiana to faint. Aylmer's assistant, who was still working in the lab, helped move her to a comfortable chamber. When he saw the birthmark, he murmured that he thought it was beautiful.
各位好，第一部分我们看到动词 shudder， 指因担忧、恐惧或是寒冷而发抖、站立。例如 Brett shuddered with disgust as he saw the cockroach on his bedroom floor.Brett 在房间地板上看到蟑螂，觉得害怕而发抖。或是 The sight of so much blood at the scene made Tim shudder. 看到现场那么多的血 ，Tim 不禁浑身颤抖。另外，除了上面的意思，这个字还可以指剧烈震动。我们可以说 The walls of the building shuddered during the earthquake. 地震时，建筑物的墙壁都在震动。或是 Neil heard a massive explosion and the ground shuddered.Neil 听到一声巨大的爆炸声，地面随之剧烈震动。接着我们看到单字 murmur， 这个字是动词，指低声说、抱怨或是咕哝。例如 Workers were murmuring about the boss's son getting the job. 工人们私底下嘀咕着老板的儿子得到那份工作的事。或是 Tom murmured something in his girlfriend's ear. Tom 在他女朋友耳边低声说了什么。
And welcome back. So Aylmer has decided that he's going to operate on Georgiana, and Georgiana has agreed because she would rather die than continue to horrify her husband. So she has agreed to allow her husband to do what he wants with her so that he will love her again. And eager to begin working, Aylmer brought Georgiana to the laboratory where he had previously conducted experiments. So he starts the process by bringing his wife to the laboratory. A laboratory is a place where scientists do their experiments. And in this laboratory, Aylmer had done a lot of other work. He had previously conducted other experiments. So as they entered, Aylmer caught a glimpse of the birthmark and shuddered, causing Georgiana to faint. To shudder means to suddenly shake your body, or your body suddenly shakes because you feel cold or scared or disgusted. You get goosebumps, for instance, and this is what happened to him when he saw the birthmark on Georgiana's face.
Right, so she passed out because, of course, she wanted to please her husband. So, of course, she was probably quite upset to see that her husband was scared. was horrified of her birthmark, and Aylmer's assistant, who was still working in the lab, or laboratory for short, helped move her to a comfortable chamber. A chamber is like a special kind of room. And in this particular case, she was moved to another place in the laboratory to be comfortable. Maybe they had a sofa in there because, again, she fainted and she needed to lie down someplace more comfortable.
Right. So chamber, yes, indeed, it's a room. It's a private room or a bedroom, but we don't really use the word chamber anymore today to mean bedroom. It's sort of an old-fashioned word, and you might say the chamber of a castle or of an old aristocratic villa, but chamber today, it's not really applied anymore. You can say chambermaid, even though we don't usually say that often in modern times, to refer to the person in a hotel who cleans the hotel rooms. So that was a word, chambermaid, that was used back then, but we wouldn't really use it today.
Okay, so again, we've got the assistant here, and he moved her into a comfortable chamber, or at least he helped move her there. But the assistant actually saw the birthmark, and he thought it was actually beautiful, and he said so, but I suppose he said so not really loud enough for Aylmer to hear, because maybe he would have gotten in trouble for saying something about Aylmer's wife, and sometimes husbands get a little jealous and stuff like that. So he murmured what he thought about the birthmark. If you murmur something, you just kind of say it like this, you know. You say it so other people can't really hear it, but you still want to say it anyway. So sometimes we talk about a heart murmur. There, a murmur is a noun. It just means an extra sound that your heart is making. But when you murmur something, you kind of say it, but it's not really that clear.
Yeah, you kind of just say it to yourself. You say it aloud, but you don't want other people to hear what you said. It's more of a commentary, a comment that you make to yourself.
Exactly. And a similar word is mumble. He mumbled this to himself. Well, I actually think it's kind of beautiful, you know. But of course, he didn't want Aylmer to hear what he said. So that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson for today. Let's continue and listen now to the second part.
Awakening to a room full of scientific wonders, Georgiana was reassured that her husband could find a way to remove the birthmark. However, as she explored the lab, she stumbled upon a journal detailing the results of his experiments, which tended to fall short of his noble ideals. Still, she was willing to do whatever he asked, so long as it would make him happy.
第二部分我们看到动词 reassure 指使安心，使得到保证或是打消点点点的疑虑。举例来说， Ted reassured his wife that he had turned off the air conditioner before leaving. Ted 向老婆一再保证他出门前已关掉冷气。或是 The police have reassured the witness that she will be protected by the authorities. 警方向证人保证他会受到官方保护。接着我们看到片语 fall short of something 表示未达到预期的标准或数量。我们可以说 The company fell short of its annual profit goal this year. 这间公司今年没达到业绩年度目标。或是 Smartphone sales this month fell short of the industry's expectations. 这个月的智慧型手机销量未达到业界的期望。再来我们看到单字 noble. 这个字是形容词，指崇高的或是高尚的。例如 Medicine is considered to be a noble profession. 行医被认为是一种崇高的职业。或是 Many people described Ricky as a noble person after he risked his life to save his neighbor. 许多人形容 Ricky 是个伟大的人，因为他冒着生命危险救他的邻居。另外，这个字可以做名词，指贵族。我们可以说 When the king had to go to battle, he took his nobles with him to help fight. 当国王必须上战场时，他带着贵族们一起协助打仗。或是 Edgar is a noble from a rich and powerful European family. Edgar 是一名出生自欧洲一个有权有势家族的贵族。
And welcome back. So in the last part, Georgiana fainted because she realized that her husband, Aylmer, was really disgusted by her birthmark because he shuddered when he caught a glimpse of it while he was taking her to the laboratory. And then after she fainted, Aylmer and his assistant took her to a chamber where she can be more comfortable. And what happens next? So Georgiana wakes up. It says here, awakening to a room full of scientific wonders. Georgiana was reassured that her husband could find a way to remove the birthmark. So she wakes up in a room where she probably sees a lot of objects and images, contraptions, things related to science that she didn't understand, a lot of scientific wonders. So seeing these things, Georgiana was reassured. She felt more secure. She felt less worried about the fact that her husband may not be able to do what he said he was able to do successfully. So she was reassured by the fact that her husband is actually a good scientist and nothing bad will happen to her.
Yep, she trusts him 100%. She was made to feel less worried about this situation, and she was pretty much sure that the husband would take care of her and that he would remove the birthmark. However, as she explored the lab, she stumbled upon a journal detailing the results of his experiments, which tended to fall short of his noble ideals. So again, she's in the laboratory and she stumbled upon a journal. If you stumble upon something, you just happen to see it by chance. You come across it, you come up to it, but you weren't really planning to. So she just happened to see maybe a little notebook or a book sitting on a shelf, and she thought, I wonder what that is. So she went over and opened it up, and she saw that it contained the results of his experiments. And if you're a scientist, of course, you probably keep a journal of your experiments. You keep records and stuff like that. So the journal detailed the results or showed the results of his experiments. But they tended to fall short of his noble ideals. I guess these were experiments that basically failed.
Yep, and here, to fall short of means to fail to achieve a goal. So if his experiments tended to fall short of his noble ideals, it means they did not reach his ideals. He was not able to do what he intended to do. I could also say, for instance, the athlete performed well, but he fell short of qualifying for the Olympic Games. So he was not able to achieve his goal of participating in the Olympic Games. Here, Aylmer's experiments fell short of his noble ideals. So the word noble means brave or admirable. It describes something that is done for society, for the greater good of the world, instead of for personal gain. So supposedly, all of Aylmer's experiments were meant to improve the world. However, these experiments fell short of his ideals, of his noble ideals, because they failed. They didn't work.
Yeah, maybe he had the noble ideal of turning lead into gold or something like that. But of course, his experiment failed. I guess as a result, was not a very successful scientist. Still, she was willing to do whatever he asked, so long as it would make him happy. So even though she doubted his ability to complete the experiments successfully, she was still a dedicated and loyal wife, and she wanted to do whatever he asked her, just as long as, or so long as, it would make him happy. So that's the condition. I'll do it if it makes him happy. I'll do it so long as it makes him happy.
Yes, so that really shows that Georgiana is indeed a dedicated wife. She's willing to do anything to make her husband happy, even if it means putting her own health, her own safety at risk.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. It looks like the operation is about to begin. We'll find out what happens in the final part of our lesson. Let's listen.
Days later, Aylmer came to Georgiana with a potion. He said it would remove the birthmark entirely and demonstrated its effectiveness on a plant, curing it of spots. Drinking it at his request, she fell asleep, her birthmark slowly fading until no trace remained. She woke up just long enough to tell Aylmer not to feel bad about what he'd done. Then she died right before his eyes.
最后第三部分我们看到名词 potion 指药水或是有疗效的饮剂，像是 The hero in the play drank a magic potion and fell in love with the princess. 这出剧里的英雄喝下了魔法药水而与公主坠入爱河，或是 Americans are said to spend more on pills and potions than any other nation. 据说美国人在药品和饮剂上的开销比其他任何国家的人都多。
So Georgiana has agreed to allow Aylmer to conduct his experiments on her to get rid of the birthmark, even though she now knows that he may be not as great of a scientist as he claimed to be, because she stumbled upon this journal that showed that a lot of his experiments fell short of their noble ideals. However, she decided to go with it anyway because she really loves her husband. Now, days later, Aylmer came to Georgiana with a potion. A potion is a drink that can be used as medicine. It's a word that refers to a drink, but the drink can be poisonous, it can be a type of medicine, or it can have a magical spell. So a potion is just a drink that has very special effects after a person drinks it. So days later, Aylmer came to Georgiana with a potion. He said it would remove the birthmark entirely and demonstrated its effectiveness on a plant, curing it of spots.
I didn't know plants had spots on them. I suppose some plants have spots that are very unsightly. They're not very attractive. They are blemishes. They are flaws. They are imperfections. So, of course, you might want to get rid of those spots if your plant has those spots. So, again, he used kind of a potion there, a medical formula, to get rid of the spots on that plant to demonstrate to Georgiana that the potion was going to work. Now, drinking it at his request, she fell asleep, her birthmark slowly fading until no trace remained. So, of course, she trusted him and she drank it at his request. So, when he told her to drink the potion, she did so, and then she fell asleep. And then while she was asleep, her birthmark slowly faded away. It slowly disappeared until no trace remained. You couldn't see any sign that there was a birthmark there at all.
Well, so far so good. It seems like the potion is working because the birthmark is slowly fading away as Georgiana falls asleep. However, is that all there is to it? Is she going to be okay? Well, she woke up just long enough to tell Aylmer not to feel bad about what he'd done. Then she died right before his eyes.
Ooh, that's a terrible ending to a story, but I guess that tells us that the experiment was unsuccessful, that it did not work. So she woke up just long enough to tell him something. So she did wake up after the experiment was over. She drank the potion, she fell asleep, the birthmark disappeared, there was no trace left behind, and then she woke up and she said, hey, don't feel bad about what you've done. Okay, so she hasn't died yet. But if she says something like this, don't feel bad, Aylmer, I guess she might know that something bad is going to happen in the end, huh?
Yep, she probably felt really bad, except she didn't show it. She kept the feeling to herself. She was probably in pain. She knew she was going to die, otherwise she wouldn't have said that to him. You know, she was even consoling him, telling him, don't feel bad that you've just killed me. And then she dies before his eyes, and that's really true love. That's some serious dedication.
Right, so this tells us a number of things, of course. You shouldn't expect other people to be perfect. There's also a lesson here. I don't think she should have been so willing to sacrifice her life for his ego. You know what I mean? She was willing to die just so he wouldn't feel bad about his failed scientific experiments. I would have, stood up for her rights if I were her. I would have said, hey, no, I'm not going to take that potion. If you don't like my birthmark, well, you better get used to it, boy, or you're going to have to divorce me and find somebody else.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that point of view, and I think that Aylmer probably has some problems that he has to deal with on his own.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Hope you learned something from this story. I know I have, and it's time now to learn some more things from our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。在课文第3部分，我们读到 Elmer 带着一瓶药水去找他的妻子。他说那瓶药水可以完全去除胎记。那么课文就写到 Drinking it at his request, she fell asleep.Her birthmark slowly fading until no trace remained. 好，文中他用到 at his request， 在这边他是说在他的要求下，我们可以用 at somebody's request 或者是 at the request of somebody 来表达按照某人的要求，应某人的请求。好，那这个句子呢，它有使用到分词构句以及独立分词构句。我们就先来复习分词构句的用法。以对等连接词 and 来连接2个主词相同的子句时，我们可以省略 and， 然后呢把其中一句的主词省略，再把那句的动词改成分词，可能会是改成现在分词 VING， 或是改成过去分词 PP。 好，那这时候如果它的动词是主动，就是用现在分词 VING， 如果是被动，就用过去分词 PP。 举例来说， He walked into his study,Sitting down at the desk. 他走进他的书房并坐在书桌前。那么 sitting down at the desk 就是用现在分词 sitting 开头的分词构句，这个 sitting 就是从 and he sat 简化而来的。好，那我们接着来看独立分词构句的用法。以对等连接词 and 去连接2个主词不一样的子句时，我们可以省略 and， 并且把其中一个子句的动词改成分词。那要特别注意，这个用法里面2个主词不一样，它们是各自独立的，都不能省略哦。举例来说， The girl looked at him,Her eyes blinking. 那个女孩看着他，眼睛眨呀眨。那这边注意到前后子句主词不同，我们前半句是完整的子句，主词是 the girl， 然后后半句它是独立分词构句，主词 her eyes 后面是直接接了分词 blinking。好，那复习完这2种用法之后，我们来帮同学们整理一下哦。分词构句和独立分词构句都是省略连接词，并且把其中一个动词改分词的结构。那差别就在于，当前后主词相同，我们可以省略其中一个主词，这时候就变成分词构句了。那么当前后主词不同，必须保留主词，这时候会是独立分词构句。我们回头来看课文句子。Drinking it at his request, she fell asleep, her birthmark slowly fading until no trace remained. 好，我们看到它是3个子句组成，可是彼此之间都没有用连接词连接。我们现在就以中间的子句 she fell asleep 为主。好，那看到它的前一句 drinking it at his request 就是分词构句哦，它省略了相同主词 she， 然后它用分词 drinking 作为开头。那么再看到这个 she fell asleep 的后面那个句子，好，后面这个 her birthmark slowly fading 它就是独立分词构句，它的主词是 her birthmark， 然后主词不同，所以我们是有保留下来的，后面直接接了分词 fading。 好，那希望用这样的句子去解说，有帮助同学们更了解这些用法。以上是今天的重点整理，我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Chamber. Francine was tired after the dinner party, so she retired to her chambers. Murmur. Thomas murmured something about having slept poorly the night before. Reassure. Kelly was reassured by the doctor's knowledge and confidence. Stumble. I stumbled across the most delightful cafe on my way to the beach. Noble. The knight was willing to die for what he believed was a noble cause.
Discussion Starter starts now!
Okay, here's our discussion starter for today. The question is, would you have attempted to remove the birthmark if you had been in Aylmer's position? Why or why not?
Well, I think Aylmer's reaction to the birthmark was not normal. And if I had been in his position, I would have tried to talk to a psychologist instead of asking my wife to get her birthmark removed.
Well, if I had been in Aylmer's position, I would have asked her to remove the birthmark. You have to put this in context. It did happen in 1843, and people just felt differently about things back then. But I don't think I would have forced my dear wife to drink a potion. I think I would have just used some makeup that you can get from your corner drugstore. Just kind of slap it on there over the birthmark, and nobody will be able to see it, and she can wash it off in the evening, and no one's feelings will be hurt. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.